I'm just playing. I'm not celebrating anything. I'm just doing a video. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, taking a look at my stuff. So I have a Russian on Russian match. I have Andrey Esipenko. Yes, Esipenko versus Daniil Dubov. Both of Russia. And this picture that you guys clicked on was them from the Russian national championships that they played. Yes. So, as always, for all of my people that are coming from the Philippines, I would say mabuhay to you, kamusta na. I appreciate you guys very much. Mabuting pagbati, ingat lagi. And maligayang pagdating sa chess, ladies and gentlemen. If anybody who is coming from Russia, I would say privyet to you, kakadela, and spasibo for coming by and taking a look at my stuff real quick. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we have e4, e5, knight comes to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4. This is probably, this is not the most common. It's probably about similar. Sometimes you'll see the Ruy Lopez, which is one of the oldest openings in the game of chess. But we do see bishop to c4, knight comes to f6, d3, and we still have the potential to go the Juco piano or the Juco pianissimo. But we do see bishop to e7. We have castles, knight comes to c3. So as you can see, black is, kind of doing their development without developing their bishop outside their chain, because we do see d6. a3, just, creating a little bit of lift for the bishop to, retreat back to a2 at some point. A lot of the times when you develop your bishop here, or you go bishop b5 and kind of, retreat your, not like that, like this. You are trying to take full advantage of this diagonal and make it just a little bit less desirable for the rook to go over to e8. Bishop comes to g4. We see h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, knight comes to d4. And this can be like slightly annoying. It pretty much only gives your queen one option, queen back to d1. You were threatening some nasties. Not only were you threatening the queen, but you were threatening to capture this pawn if the queen didn't, act right. So queen comes back to d1, c6, bishop back to a2. Like I said, creating that little pocket for that bishop to drop back in. Knight comes to e6. We are trying to, kind of block the effectiveness of the bishop on this diagonal. And then rook comes to e1, and this is the novelty of the game. So 12 moves in. We have actually in this position seen knight to e2 before. And then d5 came, and then knight came to g3. And this is something very similar that we're going to see in the actual game that we have here. We've also in this position seen bishop to e3, d5, pawn took d5, knight took d5, queen came to f3. Some very real similarities that are going on. And it's interesting because even though both of those positions are really good for white, well, not really good. They're solid. This is a slight advantage for white. White has never managed to win any of those positions. So that's interesting. Rook comes to e1, like I said. Queen to c7. Bishop now comes to e3. Rook a to d8. Queen to f3. So as you guys can see, both white and black. White does have slightly more. Not really that much more space. Probably it's a roughly even. This is a fairly even game that we see here. At this point, both white and black have both done exactly what they need to do. They've developed all their pieces. They have their rooks connected. Not like that, bam. And they do have all of their pieces, at least effectively developed. So, both players are doing, exactly what you need to do. So g6, rook a to d1. Now, something I will mention, you kind of have a setup where, you kind of would fee and kettle with bishop, but the bishop is actually over here on e7. So it's a little bit odd placement for the bishop, considering you're weakening your dark squares. So, it may come in and be relevant. In this particular position, bishop to h6 was actually legitimate as well, just cutting off the king from moving to this square and also forcing the rook over to e8. That was definitely something, but we did have rook a to d1. King came down to g7, knight down to e2. We got d5, knight to g3, knight over to d4. And this is kind of annoying because it's literally the same thing that happened earlier. But as you can see, the queen doesn't have the ability to come back, so something has to give. So the bishop takes on d4, pawn takes on d4, knight down to e2. Pawn takes e4, pawn takes e4. Bishop to d6. I mean, you're not really threatening much because, I mean, you know, your pawn has already advanced. So, I mean, you could throw a check in if you want, but, I mean, you're just going to be retreating back anyway. Knight takes d4. And we do kind of have to be a little bit careful. Not crazy careful. I mean, we might be seeing the pawn advance to e5 at some point. So, rook f comes to e8. c3, bishop to c5. And we have a b4. Bishop to b1 was a nice alternative in the position. You know, just kind of redirecting it. As you can see, I mean, this pawn is very well covered. So you don't really have as much influence now after, you know, pieces have been developed and moved and stuff like that. But we do have b4. Bishop retreats back to b6. Bishop now comes to b1. We have a5. Queen comes to e3. Now we're definitely, you know, threatening this pawn push. King goes back to g8. You know, we don't want to have any issues on this diagonal or anything. e5, knight comes to d5. So that forces the queen over to g3. We have pawn takes b4, pawn takes b4, and then we have a nice little, and this is actually like a much better position for white, but we do actually have knight takes b4. And this is not an unsound, you know, sacrifice because, of course, you know, if you do accept it, you're going to be winning, you know, you're going to be getting the knight back. So you are not giving a piece away. But these types of situations, in a kind of a rapid game, I mean, these can be kind of tough to calculate and deal with. And a lot of times you do use quite a bit of time. But if you want to go ahead and stop the video and see what white actually plays here, this is like the top move, and it is a really, really nice idea. And you'll be able to see in a minute, like, why it's so nice. Go ahead and see if you can guess it real quick. Okay, cool. So, the idea is basically just to move the knight away and not make it be subject to you know, a capture. And then, but at the same time, you're threatening to just capture, you know, the knight because the knight is on pre. So if you guessed a knight to f5, you would be absolutely correct. You are taking advantage of the fact that this is pretty much a free square because the pawn is pinned to the king. But you're really eyeing this d6 square. So after we see rook takes d1, knight back to d5, saving your knight, you do see knight to d6, and this is a very annoying move. This sequence of moves is like the best possible scenario for white. As you can see, you're threatening this knight here. You know, so the bishop doesn't really have time to come and attack. You're going to be pushing c4, so everything is just perfectly coming together for white in this position. So rook comes to e6, and then we see the square used again. So this is just like the juiciest square for white ever. I mean, it doesn't look like it because there's a pawn right there, seeming like it's kind of protecting the situation, but it is pinned, so it is of no use. So, you know, white is just gaining a whole lot of tempos on black. So the rook comes back to e7, and now we have c4. And so, like I said, I mean, black is just getting pushed severely back. The knight comes over to b4. You see knight to c8. So this is, I mean, you have a bishop that literally looks like it could get taken, but it's supporting this knight. And now you have like this nice little fork. It is an open position, so you are going to benefit from getting rid of this this bishop ultimately. But he just gave up the exchange. So knight takes e7. Queen takes on e7. Bishop down to g4. Queen to e4. This allows queen coming to b8 with check. King comes down to g7. And now we grab a pawn with queen takes b7. So now we are up the exchange. And we have gotten our pawn back. So, I mean, this is a completely like great position for white to be in. So the bishop comes down to c5 because you were placing a double attack on those pieces. The queen comes back to b8. Knight comes down to c2. Bishop comes to f2. And this is probably the most inconvenient move to have to meet as black. Because you don't really have a lot of good places to move your queen. And you're going to be, you know, either dropping some material or you're just going to allow, because the queen really wants to come into e5. So that's like its golden square. So we see queen takes c4. Queen comes to e5 with check. King comes to g8. And now we see rook to d8 with check. Bishop comes back to f8, which is the only move. But then you see queen to e7. And as you guys can see, there is no way to defend this bishop by any of these other pieces. And you can't even throw any spike checks in because the queen doesn't have anywhere to go so that, you know, you can like deliver a check at least. So it is in this position that Dubov does resign the game. And like I said, I mean, you're going to be dropping at least a piece. You know, your best option probably is going to go ahead and go to king to g7 and then allow, you know, the bishop to be taken, and you can kind of squirm a little bit out. But I mean, you know, the risk's going to be coming down, and I mean, your king is just going to be like just crazy open, and you are down an entire piece. And this pawn is absolutely dropping at some point. So this is just not something that anybody can play. I'm sure Stockfish at this point would say resigns. So that was a really nice game. I liked the stuff that came up. I think it was really interesting to use that square that seemed like it wasn't a square to literally put all your pieces, and that was like really masterful. So that was pretty good. And so I appreciate everybody very much for coming by. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan. Spasibo for anybody who is coming from Russia. And I will see you guys next time. Makita tayo mamaya aking makaibigan. I appreciate it.